Some of the finest innovations are sometimes the simplest, and some are even the oldest. In this scenario, we must go back 70,000 years. This was a hunting and gathering season. A period when people who looked just like us had drastically different lives. A tribal existence wandering the African continent. At the time, the Earth's climate was nearing the end of the Ice Age. This modification will lower sea levels by 100 meters and chill the Earth's average temperature by 6 degrees Celsius. This is Japan before and during the ice period, for comparison. As you can see, a lot of land is now underwater, and Japan is no longer linked to the Asian continent. At the time, it was thought that there were 2 million Homo sapiens, humans, on the planet. Bands of 50 to 300 people traversed the African continent looking for regions with adequate water and plants to live. While most had remained in their most familiar part of Africa, others had attempted to flee to milder regions. However, these migrations did not go smoothly. Human bones have been discovered outside of Africa dating back 100,000 years, but there is no indication that they lived for long. They were most likely killed by sickness or starvation. More migratory efforts were made until, by the end of 70,000 BC, a few more evolved tribes had successfully traveled across the area of Iran, then India, and even as far as Malaysia. Those waves of migration from Africa to Malaysia were only conceivable because of our equipment and methods' rapid development. Our forefathers were able to construct garments from furs thanks to bone needles, which kept them warm in the colder areas to which they had traveled. Humans of the period began to use throwing spears, which enabled them to hunt more successfully and from a safer distance. They utilized fire to clear woods, entice animals into traps, and promote the development of edible roots and tubers. They could also fish using bone hooks, harpoons, and stone fish traps. These are some of the instances of new tools and practices that aided our forefathers in colonizing new areas. What's more intriguing is how they started their migration to Australia, since they employed a technique that would revolutionize exploration for thousands of years to come. Walking was the only way people traveled great distances until 65,000 years ago, according to archaeologists. However, the people of Borneo had a different perspective. Humans walking the beaches of Borneo most likely observed land far out in the sea and were compelled to try to reach it. This, in turn, might have led to the development of canoes and sea transport over hundreds or thousands of years. The advent of sea transport has enabled people to visit regions where the environment has grown in isolation, with fauna utterly ignorant of the human danger. This provided our forefathers with everything they needed to not just survive, but prosper. The earliest over-the-sea migration most likely began in Borneo, where indigenous tribes must have traveled by water to Sulawesi. They made their way to New Guinea, which was still linked to Australia by land at the time, after passing a number of tiny islands. Those first few tribes to occupy the surface of Australia must have been astounded by the disparity between the two continents they had the opportunity to witness. Because Australia has been fully isolated and surrounded by water for the last 40 million years, the ecology has developed in a very unique manner. Our forefathers who crossed the Australian continent must have seen weird creatures. For example, the now extinct Diprotodon, a 3,000-kilogram animal that was the biggest known marsupial, or Megalonia, was a poisonous 7-meter-long reptile that weighed more than some of the lesser dinosaurs. For millions of years, these species developed in complete solitude. Because of Australia's isolation, it has been ill-equipped to deal with people, and as a result, around 200 Australian species have gone extinct in the 20,000 years since the first humans arrived. Surprisingly, it was discovered that the Australian settlers had begun to slip behind other African migrants in terms of technology at some point. According to the hypothesis, there was no need to develop since there were no dangers, famine, or animosity between clans on the Australian continent at the time. That's just one example of how canoes and sea travel influenced our forefathers' way of life. Since then, boats have been utilized for a wide range of jobs, assisting us in practically every aspect of life. They were utilized not just for exploration, but also for commerce, fishing, transportation, and entertainment. They are an important element of modern life, and it's often surprising to believe that our cave-dwelling forefathers created sailing 65,000 years ago. I hope you liked this video. If so, I believe you'd be interested in this one.